Hi there, Mrs. Vance again. This is the third and last part of notes for Unit 2, Chapter 2, about the chemistry of life. So we learned a lot about different kinds of bonds in the last section of this chapter, and now we're going to speak more about the hydrogen bonds as we're talking about water. Water is essential to life. There is no form of life on Earth that does not require water in some form or fashion, okay? And so the fact that we have a lot of water on Earth is an important thing for life on Earth, and water has a number of properties due to those hydrogen bonds that make it that help make life possible. So a couple of things about a couple of terms about hydrogen bonding that are important. Okay, there's a term called cohesion that refers to the tendency of molecules of the same type to stick together. Another term is called adhesion, and adhesion is the tendency of two different kinds of molecules to stick together. And both of those things are important when we're talking about properties of water. Cohesion of water is related to surface tension. That is a measure of how hard it is to break the surface of a liquid. The fact that water has surface tension is very important to certain living things, like this insect here, that's able to walk on the surface of water. And there are lots of other things as well that we'll talk a little bit more about as time goes on. Here's a question for you. All right. After a hard workout, you may notice beads of sweat on your face, like you see here on the face of this boy. What is it that holds the sweat in droplet form on your face? And of course, you should have answered cohesion. Short video about water and how water travels through a tree that also talks about cohesion.
How does water get from the roots of a tree to its leaves? The evaporation of water from leaves moves water molecules up from the roots. The evaporation exerts a pull that is relayed downward along a string of water molecules from leaf to root. Hydrogen bonds cause water molecules to stick together, a phenomenon called cohesion. As each water molecule evaporates, it pulls on the next water molecule, and it pulls on the next. This relays the pull of evaporating water molecules all the way down to the roots. The cohesion of water helps to keep gravity from pulling the water molecules back down.
All right, so that's really important to how water moves in trees and other plants, and it's important in lots of other things as well. Another important thing about the hydrogen bonds found in water is the fact that that because water forms many hydrogen bonds between water molecules, that helps moderate our temperature on Earth. When hydrogen bonds break, that heat is absorbed by the water, and when hydrogen bonds form, heat is released when those hydrogen bonds form. This is how we can maintain a relatively stable, relatively steady temperature on Earth between things that are frozen and things that are really hot and boiling, okay? And it's important to all living things because that's one way that we have of being able to cool ourselves down. When the water molecules at the surface of a substance, which have the most energy of all, evaporate, the surface of the substance cools. This is called evaporative cooling. When the surface of liquid that remains behind after the evaporation, that's going to be called cooled down. And that's important for us, for instance, when we sweat. When you sweat and the sweat evaporates, that helps keep your body cooler. It helps cool down the surface of your body because of that evaporative cooling. And lots of living things depend on this to help moderate their body temperature. Because water can exist in all three forms on Earth, that's really important to a lot of properties that we depend on water for. Okay, water is less dense as a solid than as a liquid due to the hydrogen bonding. Liquid water has molecules that can move around more easily, and they can break and reform hydrogen bonds quite freely. When water starts to freeze, the hydrogen bonds become more stable, and the distance between the molecules is maintained at a greater distance than is present in liquid water. Those stable hydrogen bonds maintain the space between the molecules, which is what makes the ice less dense. When the ice crystals form, the molecules within the ice crystal are less densely packed than they are in the liquid water, and that makes ice less dense. And that's why it floats on liquid water, because it's less dense. When you were younger, you may have heard or you may have thought that ice floated because of air that was trapped within the ice crystal, and that's not the case. It's not air, it's just space. Air involves, oxygen and nitrogen and so forth, and space is just distance between things. And so the space between maintains the larger volume at the same mass, and that's what makes it less dense. Another thing that's important about water is the fact that it is a very good solvent. A solvent is something that dissolves something else. A solution is a liquid consisting of a uniform mixture of two or more substances, and water is a very versatile solvent because it is polar. It'll dissolve both polar and ionic substances, things that form ionic bonds. It's very versatile, and it dissolves an awful lot of things. When you have a polar solute, that's the solid stuff that dissolves in water, or something that is charged like an ionic compound, those can dissolve in water, forming something called an aqueous solution. And aqueous solutions are vital to living things because that's what our cells contain, lots and lots of aqueous solutions. In an aqueous solution, some of the water molecules break apart into ions. They break apart into hydrogen ions and an OH ion, which is called a hydroxide ion. We use the pH scale to describe how acidic or basic a solution is based on the concentration of hydrogen ions within the solution. A buffer helps minimize changes in pH. So in a solution that has a lot of hydrogen ions, like you have with battery acid, lemon juice, and things like that, you have a high concentration of hydrogen ions, and that makes the solution acidic. The more hydrogen ions you have in the solution, the more acidic it is. In pure water, which has an equal number of hydrogen ions and hydroxide ions, that's what we call a neutral solution. And you don't find too many neutral solutions, but living thing solutions in cells generally remain right around 7. A little bit lower, a little bit higher than 7, but really close to 7. Pretty neutral. All right, in a basic solution, you have more hydroxide ions than you have hydrogen ions, and the fewer hydrogen ions you have, the more basic the solution is. An interesting thing about the pH scale is that each number, as you move from a higher number to a lower number, you're increasing the number of hydrogen ions by a factor of 10. So if we say that our sample of pure water has 100 hydrogen ions in it, then at pH 7, then a solution at pH 6 would have 10 times that, or 1,000 hydrogen ions. And a solution at pH 5 would have then 10,000 hydrogen ions. As you move up on the scale, then you're decreasing by a factor of 10. So if you started with you had 100 hydrogen ions at pH 7, at pH 8 you would have only 10, and at pH 9 you would have only 1. Now those are not real numbers that would really apply, because you always have thousands and millions and even higher numbers than that. But the point is that the numbers indicate an increase by a factor of 10 as you move down closer to 0, and a decrease by a factor of 10 as you move up higher toward 14. The pH scale ranges from 0 to 14. Remember, 7 is neutral, that's pure water, where you have equal numbers of hydrogen and hydroxide ions. pH values that are under 7 are called acids. They have more hydrogen ions than hydroxide. pH values over 7 are basic, having more hydroxide ions than hydrogen ions. And remember, once again, each number on the scale represents 10 times as many hydrogen ions as the next higher number. In living systems, pHs generally remain right around 7, like I said before. But oftentimes chemical reactions within the cells produce products that might be more acidic or more basic. If the pH changes drastically, that can be harmful, if not deadly, for the cell. And so there are solutions called buffer solutions that can help minimize the changes in pH as those kind of reactions occur. A buffer will accept hydrogen ions when there is excess acid in the solution, and it will donate hydrogen ions when it's an excess base in the solution, and that helps maintain the pH right around 7. All right, here's another question for you. Compared to a basic solution at pH 9, the same volume of an acidic solution at pH 4 has how many times more hydrogen ions? And you should have been able to figure out that that was about 100,000 more times. A lot more ions at pH 4 than you have at pH 9. All right, one more thing. When we're looking for life on other planets, we're looking for water. Now, I said earlier that living things on Earth, every living thing on Earth requires water, and we assume that is the case with life in other places. And so we're always looking when we send the rovers to Mars, or we go to the moon or places like that, we're looking for the presence of, or the indication that water has been present in those places to determine whether it's possible that life might have evolved on other planets. So your last question, why is the presence of water important in the search for extraterrestrial life? And that's, of course, because we can't even conceive of a type of life that would not require water, since our only experience is with life that does require water. And that is the end of the notes for Part 3 of Unit 2.